Hello and welcome back to another episode in this series of Roman families and Roman nobility. And today we are discussing about the family of Caecilii Metelli, and I have put here as a headliner that was this the most successful of all the families, and that is one of the key questions that we are being examining today also. That what constitutes a successful family in the Roman nobility and how we could measure it. So that's agenda for today. Overview of the Caecilii Metelli family. I will go through family branches and their connections with other families, and then discuss about this topic of what are the most successful of the families and how we could determine, how we could answer this question. And then lastly we will see a case, one example case of the marriages of the Caecilii Metelli family and what we can learn from it. Caecilii Metelli family overview. They were plebeian nobility, and they reached the consular level at 284, so they were quite early on of these rising plebeian families in Roman setting, and that rise happened to coincide with some of the most important wars in the history of Rome, and Caecilii Metelli had their own part to play in those. Originally they were perhaps from Praeneste, and with this map and everything about the family origins, we must be very careful not to make it too much out of it, because these are very much speculative and based on family legends and very little actual archaeological or historical evidence. But this is one way of putting them into the map, and that they were from Praeneste, and which located a bit of northeast from Rome originally. But by this time, when they reached the consular level, they were a Roman family. Nevertheless, they were inside the city of Rome. They were very much established there in the institutions and the careers. Caecilii Metelli is quite large family with many branches, and is one of the better known families in terms of individuals, number of individuals that we know from the family, and that's why it's also a very interesting one for us to examine. And as we will see during this video, there was an exceptional amount of success that this family reached in the Roman system. And the family culture is overall, it can be called as traditional. They held traditional values, and when we examine the individuals in and their careers, we do not see things like innovations or great renewals or upturning of the old order or that kind of things. Instead, we see a rather conservative and predictable family here, and very much in contrast, for example, to the Claudii Pulchri, who were the innovators and always disrupting things, and Caecilii Metelli for certain weren't like that at all. Here is the overall view of the family tree, and as you can see, it's very wide, so there are many children at each generation, and it was expanding rapidly into many branches from the original source. And also you can see that there is quite a long continuum in time of this family. There are 7 or 8 generations that we can see here. And I think Caecilii Metelli family history can be divided into 3 quite distinctive phases. This is one way of dividing it. There are another ways as well. But I think this is quite instructive for the family history. And the first is the early phase, from the Punic Wars to Macedonian Wars, roughly from 250 to 150 BC, about 100 years of early phase when the family legacy was built and family fortune was built as well. Then there's the high phase of the Metelli, about 150 to 110 BC, and this is the phase when you see a great deal of consuls coming out from this family, and just about everywhere you look in this period in Rome, you will find at least one Caecilius Metellus there. So they were everywhere during this period. And the final generations of the Metelli, and also the final generations of the Republic itself, from about 110 to 50 BC. And this was period of, I would say, relative decline in the importance of the Caecilii Metelli family. They weren't that many consuls anymore. They weren't anymore the richest family around, but they still were very influential, and they were involved practically in everything that happened during those last decades of the Republic. And let's take a closer look here first with those first generations. And this is where it all started. Lucius Caecilius Metellus Denter, who was consul in 284, was the first consul of this family. And incidentally, we don't know much at all of the generations of Caecilii Metelli before him. And usual case is that before the family reaches the consular level, it has been established in Rome at least for a few generations already, and has reached the level of praetorship sometimes. And then individual arises that becomes a consul and raises the whole family into kind of new level of status. Because once you have had one consul in family, then you are a consular family by definition. And that carried on for many generations, the prestige of even one consul in family. And of course, what you wanted to do is you wanted to raise from this consular level into the higher levels of nobility. And the one criteria, for example, that I'm using is that when there are 3 generations of consuls in the family, then I consider that it belongs into nobility. There are many different ways to define this word and this concept, but I used this one. So what we can see here is that after Denter has become consul, his son comes 2 times consul in 250s, and then his son, the grandson of Denter, Calvus, becomes consul in 206, and by this time the family had been established firmly into the highest elite of the Rome, and highest plebeian elite, I might say, because of course this still doesn't match the patrician level of prestige yet. But in any case, until this point of 206 consul Metellus Calvus, we can say that this is still very ordinary plebeian family, even though very successful one, but still within the limits of previous and other families of this same level. But from there on, the family is divided into 2 distinctive branches by the sons of Metellus Calvus. And we will first look at the smaller one of these, and this is what I call as the Calvus branch. What is distinctive in Caecilii Metelli family is that they use individual cognomina for nearly every individual here in the family. So we have Calvus, we have Delmaticus, we have Numidicus, we have Pius, and so on. And that makes it quite much easier to distinguish between different individuals who might have otherwise have similar kind of names. For example, the prenomen that was used a lot was Quintus, and as you can see, there are many generations of Quintuses here, and also Lucius and Marcus were quite often used. And the Calvus branch of the Metelli, as I call them, started with 206 consul, and then there was the consul of 142, Lucius Metellus Calvus, whose both sons became consuls in 119 and 109, Delmaticus and Numidicus. Then there is daughter Caecilia Metella of Calvus, who married Lucius Licinius Lucullus, who became praetor in 104 and would have probably become consul unless he would have made some mistakes in his military career. But his father and actually the son of Lucullus and Caecilia Metella also became consul. So it was firmly established in the plebeian elite of families at this time through marriage as well. And of course the Delmaticus and his daughter Caecilia Metella married Marcus Aemilius Scaurus, consul of 115, who was the leading statesman of his own era and who really controlled the Senate and the political decisions for at least a decade or two. Numidicus' son Metellus Pius married Licinia, who probably was from the Licini Crassi family, as many others are in the marriages of Caecilii Metelli. And then they also, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius and Licinia adopted the son of Licinia Crassa Prima and Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica Serapio. And this adopted son is known by name of Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius Scipio Nasica. Quite a name for us. And he was the consul of 52, right in the end of the Republic. And this is the kind of continuum in the family that you can see that there are many generations and generations after generations of consuls, and they intermarry with especially the Licini Crassi and other important families of the era. But what I want to highlight here next is quite interesting figure of circular development in marriages between families. And this is not by far isolated incident, as we will see later on. Let's start from there up at Quintus Caecilius Metellus Calvus, consul of 206. He had two sons, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus, who was consul at 143, and Lucius Caecilius Metellus Calvus, who was consul at 142. And you can be sure that it's no coincidence that they are year after each other as consuls. And Macedonicus had a daughter, Caecilia Metella, who married Publius Scipio Nasica Serapio, and who was consul of 138. They had son, this Serapio, consul of 111, who had son who was adopted by, as I explained, Licinia and Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius. So what we have here is the kind of offspring of consul of 206 that goes around and ends up together in the same place. And I think this is very interesting because this is very Roman kind of marriage circle that goes around and comes around in the kind of same place where it started. Why it happened? Of course, there are individual explanations of each situation, but I think in overall sense there are other explanations as well. For example, family fortune, keeping it together in the family, not spreading it into other families. This was a very handy way of taking care that family fortune stayed within the family and didn't, branch out into different directions. And of course, this was one way of keeping up the family legacy and keeping up family connections, because if you consider, for example, here that there are two generations of Cornelii Scipiones who are tied one way or another into Caecilii Metelli. And then there are generations of Licini Crassi as well in this same circle. So those three families were all interconnected and deeply intertwined within each other by this form. Okay, and let's move on, and this is the second part, second branches of the family, and these are the offspring of Quintus Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus. About his daughter, Caecilia Metella, we already discussed. He married with Scipiones. Then there is consul of 117, Lucius Caecilius Metellus Diadematus. And his family branch didn't produce any more consuls, but when it comes to history, this is quite interesting one, because there is a name at the bottom, Titus Pomponius Atticus, and this is obviously the very near and close friend of Marcus Tullius Cicero, whom we know from the history. And Atticus was supporter and even financier of Cicero in many times. And you can also see that Pomponi and Caecilii Metelli were very deeply involved with each other through these marriages and adoptions. So this was really, again, this kind of circular movement there. Then we can look at Balearicus, consul of 123. He had 2 daughters and 1 son. His son, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Nepos, became consul in 98, married Licinia. Again, I think we can assume that this is one of the Licinii Crassi, even though we don't know it for sure. And they had 2 sons that became consuls, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Nepos Junior and Quintus Caecilius Metellus Celer. And Celer, of those sons, married Claudia, the infamous Claudia or Lesbia, as she is called in the poems. And what's interesting in this is that if you look the highlighted family members again, you will see that Balearicus's daughter, Caecilia Metella, married Appius Claudius Pulcher, that was consul in 79, and their daughter was this Claudia that married Celer, who was a grandson of Balearicus. So again, we will see that it forms a circle. And here the political motivations are quite clear. The father of Appius Claudius Pulcher, the consul of 79, was Appius Claudius Pulcher, consul of 143. He was the consular colleague of Quintus Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus. And this is quite interesting link between these 2 families. Appius Claudius Pulcher and Macedonicus quite probably have agreed that Pulcher's son Appius Claudius Pulcher will marry the granddaughter of Metellus Macedonicus. And that was part of the deal between the families. And then when Metellus Macedonicus wasn't any longer, and the older Appius Claudius Pulcher had already passed away as well, these families continued keeping up these connections by having the daughter and son of these families again marry. That is the Metellus Celer and Claudia. So this is, I think, very much in line of the idea that in Rome the connections between families were very tight and they were very long lasting, because if you consider the 3 generations of continuing political arrangements and marriage arrangements, you have to believe that there has to have been some significance in this. There has to have been reasons why they did it, and also there has to have been some benefit of these arrangements to both families, because both of these families could have chosen any family at all, and any family at all would have been very happy to align themselves with these families, because these were the leading families. If you consider the amount of consuls, for example, that you can see even in this picture from the Caecilii Metelli alone, that is a quite staggering amount. And then you have the Claudii Pulchri, who also had several consuls during these decades. so they really could have chosen anybody, and they would have been welcomed by any family. So and they choose these exact combinations that last for 3 generations. It's no coincidence. It has to have some quite deep meaning for them. Okay, then there is also daughter Caecilia Metella of Macedonicus, who married with Servilius Vatia. And Servilii Vatii were a branch of Servilii, and that was very important of noble families of the time in Rome, and with long traditions as well. So it was very much in line of these high nobility matches. Then let's take a look at the last branch of these sons of Macedonicus. There is Marcus Caecilius Metellus, who was consul and at 115. And of him we really don't know anything at all about his marriages or possible children. So as far as we know, the family line ended there. There is also Caius Caecilius Metellus Caprarius, who was consul at 113. And he had 4 sons and 1 daughter, and both of his 2 of his sons became consuls, Lucius Caecilius Metellus and Quintus Caecilius Metellus Creticus. And of them, their offspring we don't know that much about, but they didn't reach the consular level at least. And we also see that there is Licinius Crassus connection as well here. Then there is this branch in the lower part of the screen of Marcus Caecilius Metellus, and here we don't know how they were related to other Caecilii Metelli. They could have been sons of consul of 115, for example, but we don't know. So I have not placed any link between them. They are just here as a late example of Caecilii Metelli and their connections. And when you consider this kind of family altogether, and especially Macedonicus, who had 4 sons to become consuls, and that's, by the way, the record in the Roman history. No Roman has had more than that. He is alone in the top. In Claudii Pulchri, there are a couple of examples of having 3 sons become consuls, but Quintus Caecilius Metellus Macedonicus is the only one who has 4 sons of becoming consuls. And that is very extraordinary achievement in itself. And as you can see, they were not isolated into that generation, the golden generation kind of Caecilii Metelli. It continued a couple of generations still after that, the consulships. And here you can see the kind of continuity of 6 generations, for example, of consuls. And that really is quite an achievement, because it means in practice that you have at least a couple of 100 years of each generation becoming consul in Rome in the family, direct descendants. And this is quite remarkable family in that respect. About their marriage connections, there's interestingly, we don't know that much about their family connections. We know many of Caecilii marriages, that is for sure, but considering the amount of Caecilii Metelli we actually know quite a few marriages and how they were aligned with other families. And it's difficult to know why don't we have this information. It can be a sign that marriage deals were not important part of the Caecilii Metelli strategy. But on the other hand, the evidence what we have about those marriages seems to suggest otherwise. It seems that Caecilii Metelli made very strategic connections with other families. So we don't know. Or it can be also that Caecilii Metelli were so rich and powerful that they could, for example, align with themselves with lesser families, smaller houses, or even regional families, and bring them into Rome and have them tied almost in clientship-like connection with Caecilii Metelli. That's also possible, that okay, you want to come in Rome, so have your son or daughter to marry my son or daughter, and let me dictate you how you will behave in the politics and in economic matters, and then you can marry with our prestigious family. These kind of deals absolutely were part of the Roman tradition, so it wouldn't be passed off the Caecilii Metelli to do them. Or there can be some other reason. For example, considering how traditional Caecilii Metelli were in their many actions, it might be that the family simply had a tradition of marrying with families of certain area outside Rome. That's also a possibility. In any case, however it is, what we know is that Licinii Crassi and Caecilii Metelli were very much connected. Nearly all branches of the Caecilii Metelli have some branch of Licinii Crassi intermarrying with them. And obviously that is by design. They wanted to align themselves with these two families. Caecilii Metelli are also connected with Cornelis Scipiones and Claudii Pulchri from the patrician families, as I have demonstrated already. Then let's proceed into the next topic of this video and discuss a little bit about the most successful families and how we can measure the success and how we can quantify somehow the successful family in Roman context. And the first thing is that whenever there is a competition in something, and there most definitely was a competition between aristocratic families and in prestige, whenever there is competition, there is a winner. There is someone who wins and someone who loses. And how we can judge this and how we can say that which were the successful families in the Roman Republican context. There has been many answers offered to this question and many different kind of approaches that we could take. For example, we can argue that Julii Caesares were the most successful family because they break the system in the end and become monarchs, establishing an imperial family line. And I think there is nothing wrong in that logic. It's one way of looking at it. Obviously, I think it's not very Republican way of looking at this, because the Roman Republic itself had quite a lot of allergy towards the kings, and they didn't want kings there. And that's why this kind of regal ambitions of Julii Caesares were exception. They were exceptional family in that regard. If we then consider the Republican kind of continuity into imperial era, Domitian Ahenoparbi and Claudii Pulchri, both families, did very well in the imperial era as well. So they managed to keep their families on top of the Roman society, both during the Republic and during the imperial time. And that's one way of defining success, obviously, because they could keep themselves not only alive as a family, but also to be at the very top of the Roman society. And then there are several other ways we can measure success without taking the consideration of empire here and transition from the Republic into empire. Because I think that nobody in Rome knew that there would be an empire coming. They were all assuming and wanting the Republic to continue. And that's why, for me, the criteria for the most successful of families has to do with the Republican traditions and how inside Republican system a family can not only rise into prominence but also maintain that prominence for as long as possible. And let's check some statistics here. These are the consulships divided into families between 150 and 49 before Christ. So this is the last century of the Republic. And Caecilii Metelli really dominate this scene. They were extraordinarily successful in elections. They had 15 consulships compared to the next coming Cornelii Lentuli, who had 8. And Marii family is obviously an exception here as well, because Gaius Marius alone held 7 consulships, which was the record in Roman history. And that his son only had 1 consulship. So it was kind of exception here. But the other families, Calpurni, Pisones, Emili, Lepidi, and so on, they all had something like 5 or 6 consuls. But Caecilii Metelli had 15, which is 3 times as much. And why I started with this statistic is that the consulship was the first and foremost goal of the Roman public career. If you were in politics in Rome, you wanted to be a consul. That was the goal. And everything that came after that, being elected as a censor or princeps senatus and so on, that was like a cherry on top. But you have to be consul. And maintaining your family at the consular level was the main goal of every Roman family and every Roman noble person. And that's why it's the single most important criteria here in the aristocratic competition. And Caecilii Metelli dominate that scene really strongly here during the last century of the Republic, I might add. Then the other dimension here is not only reaching consular level or having several family members to reach the consular level, but how many consecutive generations you have as consuls. And meaning that, great-grandfather, grandfather, father, son, and so on. How many generations after generation become consuls. And here we can see that Dominiti Ahenobarbi had 8 generations. It was continuous family line that reached consulship between years 192 BCE and 32 CE. That is for over 200 years. That's a very long run, and also tells about their successful transition from the Republic into imperial era. Cornelis Scipiones had 7, and Caecilii Metelli had 5, and so on. And you can see here already that quite many families here aimed not only to have consulships collected into the family line, but also having them collected in consecutive manner, so that there were really continuous consulship generations inside family. And when you can consider here, the statistics are limited into families that have 4 or more consulships, and 4 generations means already more than 100 years of continuity, and that's a pretty long time. If you consider something like what happened in your family 100 years ago, and imagine that your great grandfather would have been, for example, president or prime minister, and you will, and every generation, and you would be as well. Then you can get some idea how important the continuity here is as a criteria to measure these families against each other, and to understand their position and their amount of prestige that they held in the Roman society. Added to the consulships, the provincial commands are very important, and in typical Roman political career, there were 2 provincial commands, one after praetorship and one after consulship. And they were, if not mandatory, they were at least the norm. That was usually happening. And we don't know about all provincial commands that happened during the last century of the Republic. We have quite sporadic evidence on them, really. But what we know, what has survived into us, we can see the same kind of dominance here as with consulships for the Caecilii Metelli. And that is of course very logical because as I said, it was a part of the career that before you reach the consulship and after it that you will do a provincial command. And so in terms of numbers of provincial commands, Caecilii Metelli, Calpurni Pisones are here on the top. But here is also a point where we can see some exceptions of the rule as well. For example, if you consider how many consuls and consulships Cornelii Lentulii had collected in their family, they have actually quite a few, quite a low number of provincial commands. Not every family wanted to gather provincial commands, and these were military commands mostly. and at least it was the military nature of the office. So some families really didn't want to have those. And then there are, for example, Licinii Luculli, who had 6, and they had only a couple of consuls in their family. So here we can see this kind of shift in family strategies as well, that not only having the consuls, but also how many provincial commands you do and how important part of that kind of military leadership is your family tradition will dictate some of these careers. So this is very interesting, I think, a statistic. Another dimension of looking at the provincial commands is that how many years altogether there have been served in provincial commands, because provincial command usually lasted 1 to 3 years, but there are some that lasted quite a bit longer, and also some that were quite short. And here is the last, during the last century of the Republic, Valerii Flacci, for example, served 36 years in provinces, in provincial commands. That is, if you divide it into equal parts, that means that 1/3 of the time some Valerius Flaccus was in provinces as a commander. Kind of staple name of provincial commands there. And then there are Caecilii Metelli, of course, with 35 years. It's not anyhow surprising that they rank high here, because they had so large number of provincial commands in overall. And Licinii Luculli and Pompeii Magni of course are high here, because and Iuliii Caesarea, because they had long commands there. But this is another dimension, and here we can see that there are families that accepted provincial commands but only took kind of short rounds there and then came back to Rome as quickly as possible. And then there are families that really spent a lot of time in the provinces and in the military commands. And for some of these families, specialization into these provincial commands seems to be the leading strategy for their family to gain prominence. It might be connected to the fact that when you went into provinces, you probably came back as quite a rich person. It was time to enrich yourself and your family, and way to finance, for example, the political careers of your sons and so on. But of course here as well, in the overall number of provincial commands, we must remember that there is quite sporadic nature of evidence, of historical evidence of the provincial commands. So we don't have the whole picture. We can only have information on some families, and of some we don't. Added to the political dimension of being consul and the military dimension in the provincial commands, there is also a religious dimension in the Roman aristocratic competition for influence. And this is the priesthoods, a number of priesthoods, highest priesthoods here. And this gives a little bit different picture, overall picture, of the balance of power and families against each other. Caecilii Metelli are on the top here, which is no surprise because we know that there were quite many of them active in politics in this time. But they are not anyhow as dominating as they have been in the couple of past statistics. So they have 9 priesthoods, where, for example, Licini Crassi have 8. And if you remember earlier in the video, I thought that Caecilii Metelli and Licini Crassi families are quite a lot aligned also through marriages with each other. And then there are, for example, family of Mukis Kevole, who hasn't come up in these statistics before. And they were a family of jurists mainly. They had quite many consuls as well. But what's important to notice is that they really excel in the religious appointments. What this tells to us, there are some different points of view we can take. For example, we can think that those families that couldn't make it in the politics or in the military chose the religious ground to make advances and bring themselves up as leading families, and that's quite interesting thought, I think. It also is possible that the family traditions favored religion here, that they were in these terms kind of religious families or interested or wanting to be involved with religion. That you can take your pick, because we don't have that much evidence and information. But for example, if you consider Domiti Ahenoparbi, who had those successes in the succession of generations as consuls, they still only had 4 priesthoods. And Domiti Ahenoparbi certainly weren't that active in the provincial sphere either. So this gives you already some idea how the aristocratic competition in Rome was organized. There were so many venues where you could compete against another families, that some families specialized in this, and other families specialized in that kind of into different kind of areas of competition. And I think this is interesting part of that republican tradition, how many faced, how many sided the competition really was, and partly because of this plurality really that exists here. I don't like the idea that we should take, for example, Julii Caesares as the most successful family of all, because turning a republic into an empire that has a lot less avenues for aristocratic competition is not that difficult. I don't think that's the special thing. I think the special thing is that with this great diversity of options and possibilities for competition, how you can make the most balanced and most effective use of what family members you are, and build your family status through different means of provincial commands, of consulships, of priesthoods, and so on. And then there are the triumphs. And this is quite interesting, because triumph was celebration of great victory, military victory. So the expectation here probably is that if your family is big on the provincial level, they probably should be ranking high here in the number of triumphs celebrated. But it wasn't so. And what makes this interesting also is that it's not only the number of triumphs, but also the number of individuals gaining these triumphs that was important for the Romans. And if you look at the last century of the Republic, there was 57 triumphs and 46 triumphatores who celebrated them. And in this table here, I have listed all 15 families that had more than one triumph. So these all are families that had more than one triumph, and rest of the families had only one. And a typical family had really one or two triumphatores in a 1 century. So I mean, they were exceptional events. Once in half a century, you would expect your family to have a triumph. except Caecilii Metelli. They had 9 triumphatores and 11 triumphs. And they really have optimized this compared to other families. I mean, they have 5 times more triumphs than typical family, at least 5 times more. And while other families could expect that they had a triumph once in 50 years, the Metelli had it once in 10 years. And this is something that contemporary people must have noticed. It must have been overpoweringly, kind of publicity stunt for the Caecilii Metelli always. And I can only imagine how it must have been feeling for those contemporaries who really only see probably a couple of triumphs during their whole lifetime. And then there are Caecilii Metelli who is, once in a decade one of them celebrates a triumph. So this is kind of speciality of Caecilii Metelli really, because no family comes close. And if you see here Pompei Magni and Marii, there is only one person who takes all of those triumphs. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus obviously had 4 triumphs, and that was a record in itself. And as well as Gaius Marius, who had 3 triumphs. Those are very exceptional individuals. The families themselves were not that important at all. But of all the other families, the maximum is 2 triumphs per family, and even then those 2 went into 2 different individuals, whereas Caecilii Metelli have 9 persons celebrating 11 triumphs altogether. So this is something of really their crown and their part of their family history and how they wanted their family to be seen. And this is one of the most interesting tables I think there are. Then there is a number of censorships during the last century, and they were and to understand why censorship is so important part of the aristocratic competition, you have to consider that it was not part of the official curriculum in politics. That ended with consulship, but some individuals were elected as censors after the consulship, and they were altogether 28 censorial level families in this period, and these 28 families really can be considered the leading 28 families of the Republic, because you don't read censorship in anyhow by accident or coincidence. And what's interesting here is that 8 of these 28 families held out 20 of all available 42 offices of censor. So practically 8 families rule half of the available censor positions. And this means quite concentration of power into hands of these 8 families that really have more than one censorship. And we may notice that also in this table, Caecilii Metelli are on the top. They have 5 censorships against Licini Grassi, who have 3 in the second place. And then there are several families that have two censors coming next. And what's interesting is that at year 102, it was the only time in the history of Rome when both censors, there were 2 always elected, came from the same family. Of course, it was Caecilii Metelli here as well. And the office of censor was very prestigious one, because they decided who the senators were, and they also had quite a lot of influence on economic sphere of the Republic, as well as in some other matters like laws and stuff. But in censorships you can see the same as in consulships, that they were much concentrated into same hands, into these few families that really were the topmost families. And here is a final ranking made by me. The calculation is by me. And all of these tables I have presented here before in this video, I have given 1 point each time the family has been in reaching these top positions. And this means this is very rudimentary way of ranking them, and it's based on the idea that in more widely you are connected, more widely you have efforts to become an influential family, the more prestige accumulates into the family. And here we can see that on the first place there are Caecilius Metellus and Claudius and Claudii Pulchri. They share the first place, 6 points both. And then there are Licini Crassi and Cornelii Lentuli following them, and then Iuli Caesares and Calpurni Pisones, Dominiti Aino Barbi and Cornelii Scipiones, and Cassi Longini and Emili Lepidi rounding up the top 10. And if we want to test how influential these 10 families are, they held 4 princeps senatus places, 20 censorships, 64 consulships. They had 8 pontifex maximus, the high priest positions, 49 priesthoods, 51 provincial commands, and 109 years of provincial service altogether. And what this means is that this validates that these really were the most influential families. Because leftover for the family was, for example, 1 princeps senatus place. So 4/5 of the princeps senatus came from these families. And 19 censorships, that is half of the censorships, and 3 pontifex maximus out of 11. So you can really see how influential and important these families were. And then there's the question that should we consider the Claudii Pulchri, who were the patricians, or the Caecilii Metelli, who were the plebeians, as really the most influential family? And here's one way of examining this. Princeps senatus could only come from the patrician family, so Claudii Pulchri have here the upper hand in that regard. Censorships, Caecilii Metelli held 5, Claudii Pulchri had 2, so advantage for Caecilii Metelli. Consulship, 15 to 5, 3 times of more consuls for Caecilii Metelli. Pontifex Maximus was 2 times from the Caecilii Metelli family, whereas there wasn't none from the Claudii Pulchri. Priesthoods overall went to the Caecilii. And then provincial commands and provincial services as well. So I think Caecilii Metelli has to be considered as the most successful and the most high ranking of the Republican era noble families. And why this matters really is that the contemporary experience of those people living actually in those years, in the last century of the Republic, they probably would have came into the same conclusion that Caecilii Metelli were dominating the topmost family of them all. And if you compare this to the usually history writing and popular culture of our time, our own time, where there is Julius Caesar and there is Julius Caesar and pretty much nobody else than Julius Caesar, who was still only one member of a family that wasn't doing that great really in the competition of families. And sometimes you have Pompeius mentioned as well. But there it is. And neither of these families were important really in this setting, in this context. And that's why I think when we talk about Roman Republican era and history, we shouldn't concentrate on those 1 or 2 names. We should concentrate on the families and understand their family culture and family traditions as explaining how this came to be and why were they so important families and so influential during the Republican era. Okay, and the last part of this video is one of marriage cases of Caecilii Metelli. As I said, we know some of them, and this is one of them. And this is very interesting one in many regards, and let me show you what I mean. Here you can see a rendering of family trees of the married couple here. The married couple is Appius Claudius Pulcher, consul of 79, and Caecilia Metella as his wife. And what you can see here in this chart is that both families had already tradition of 5 generations of consular level before this marriage. So both Caecilia Metella and Appius Claudius really knew that they were the center of Rome. They were the center of attention. They were there exactly in the middle of everything. And this is very prestigious family background for both of them. And as you can see, there is they both come from the families that I explained why these two families are ranked on the top in the Republic. And you can also see that there are many censos and triumphatores there in their ancestors as well. And why this family union is very interesting one is not only the history involved and the importance in Roman history, but also what it tells about aristocratic culture here in Rome. And also I made a headline here that is this a match made in heaven? Because at first glance you would think that this is something like fairy tale wedding or something like that. That in any case it's something of like from the fairy tales. But the reality is that Caecilii Metelli and Claudii Pulchri had quite different family cultures. And if we look the offspring of this married couple, one of who is pretty infamous and or notorious, Publius Claudius Pulcher, who called himself as Claudius. And there is also this Claudia, his sister, known as Lesbia in poems of Catullus. Can we really say that such a controversial persons come from a peaceful and calm and balanced family? I think the very rebellious and difficult nature of these offspring of this couple tells about the clashes between the family cultures of the Caecilii Metelli and Claudii Pulchri. Conservative Metelli and very much like eccentric nobles, Claudii Pulchri, they came from very different worlds still. And I think this kind of clashes in family culture and created tensions that created pretty eccentric and difficult personalities as a consequence in those children. So it's very much, I think, not match made in heaven, but quite the contrary of it. Match that was made between leading families out of political pressure and out of the necessities of the aristocratic competition rather than any more humane motivations of establishing a family. And this is quite typical of those high Roman families, that personal feelings didn't matter at all. They didn't come into the picture at all, because it was all about the family legacy, family honor, and the family prestige and place into society that they were building and actively constructing. There are also a couple of quite interesting facts here. As I've already noted out, the father of Appius Claudius Pulcher, consul 79, was consular colleague of the grandfather of his wife, Metellus Macedonicus. They shared the consulship in 143, and this is something like, as I explained, this is the motivation for this marriage, very probably, that they wanted to bring their families more closer together and start building the connections and cooperation between families, and shared marriages was obviously one very strong motivation to cooperate with someone, because when you are advancing the interests of the other family that is connected to you by marriage, you will also advance the interests of your family as well. And here is that another side of that marriage arrangement that I already presented before, that were offspring of Claudius Pulcher and Caecilia Metella, Claudia, married the offspring of the Caecilia Metella's father, Balearicus. And this is one circle, but there are more to come here. This is another circle, another way of looking at it. Because offspring of Quintus Caecilius Metellus Calvus, consul of 206, was divided here. And what you can see here is that Claudia, or Claudia, as they themselves called, third of Claudia, was married to Lucius Licinius Lucullus, consul of 74. And this is the offspring of Praetor 104 Lucullus and Caecilia Metella, who is offspring of Metellus Calvus. So you can see here another circle as well. Also in the offspring of this married couple of Caecilia Metella and Appius Claudius Pulcher. And this kind of circle might be a coincidence, or might be explained away by some temporary or individual reason. But both of their daughters completing this kind of circular marriage movement, that cannot be a coincidence. It has to be planned. It has to have some meaning, and it has to have some appeal and logic for the Romans to do. And what's quite interesting as well is that this kind of circular movement you can also observe in the side of the Claudii Pulchri themselves. So if you, it's not as complete as here, but if you examine the Claudia Minor Gracchi, and who is the daughter of Appius Claudius Pulcher, consul of 143. She married with Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, tribune of 133. And brother of Tiberius Sempronius was Gaius Sempronius, who married Licinia Crassa, and their daughter Sempronia married Fulvius Flaccus Pampulus, and they had a daughter, Fulvia Flacca, who married then the child of Appius Claudius Pulcher and Caecilia Metella, that is the Claudius here. So you can see this similar kind of circular marriage arrangement. And if you observe, the Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus was consul of, who was the father of these Gracchi brothers, was consul of 177, as was the Gaius Claudius Pulcher, who was the father of consul 143 Claudius Pulcher. So very similar kind of arrangement as the Appius Claudius Pulcher and Metellus Macedonicus had, was also being made by the father of this Claudius Pulcher and Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. Again, this kind of circular movement of marriages and families aligning themselves for 3 or more generations. And as I said, once, if you see it happening once, it might be a coincidence, but as you can see, happens all and all over again here, even in this limited sphere of these couple of families and these alliances. So this was very Roman kind of circular marriage movement that happened between the noble families. And this is something I haven't seen yet, at least, to be fully examined, that exactly how often this kind of circular marriage movement happened, and what are the implications of it, and what can we learn or deduct from it, also from the political or historical sense. So if we drew this up together, the Caecilii Metelli family history and family strategies, we can see that success in Roman aristocratic competition necessitated of employment of various means of competition. And the family that was most capable of employing many different kind of ways was likely to rise into prominence and stay there for the many centuries or many generations to come. And the families that focused only on one means didn't do that well. So there is a very much a logic of having to diversify your family strategies and means of getting influence. And the family culture of the Caecilii Metelli very much seemed to favor the traditional values. Service for the state, traditional recognitions of the service, like office positions and triumphs. And this all has led me to ask this question, that maybe we could call Caecilii Metelli as the most patrician-like of the plebeian families, because they clearly were reliving or reconstructing the patrician family kind of ideals, even though they themselves were plebeian family. And I think that's a quite interesting point to consider when we consider the Caecilii Metelli and why they were successful, and why they stayed so long and so prominently there on top of the aristocratic competition. Maybe simply because they were more patrician-like than patrician families themselves. Okay, then that was the overall view on the Caecilii Metelli family, and one glimpse of that marriage combination that produced so many interesting patterns, brought those patterns visible here. And maybe we will see with video of some other family next time. Thank you.